Good evening, everyone. I am Christine Deschler, the Chair of the Arlington Finance Committee, and I'm calling to order the February 18th, 2026 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. This meeting is being conducted via Zoom, consistent with the provisions of state law promoting access to public meetings, and is being recorded. Before we go any further, I am going to conduct a roll call vote to make sure that we have a quorum and to make sure that everyone can hear and be heard. So when I call out your name, please answer in the affirmative, starting with Paul Bear.
I'm here.
George Remy.
Here.
Scott Mullen.
Here.
Sophie. Sophie, are you here?
She seems to have frozen.
All right. Grant.
Here.
Carolyn. Rebecca.
She's here. She signaled.
Can you speak, Rebecca?
She's getting there. She's trying to figure out how to unmute. Okay.
And Sophie, are you here?
I am here. I think I was frozen.
Okay. I'll get back to Rebecca. Josh?
Here.
Michael? Is Charlie here? All right. Chuck Carney?
Here.
Daryl Harmer?
Here.
Annie?
Here.
Alan Jones? Topher Hyam? Peggy is not here tonight. Al Tosti?
Here.
John Griffin?
Yes. Here.
I am here. Dean Carmen? Dave McKenna?
Here.
Our Executive Secretary, Micaiah Healy?
Here.
I'm going to go back to Rebecca.
Here.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead. Let me confirm there is a quorum and everyone finally can speak and be heard. All right. During the meeting, I'm requesting that everyone remember to mute your phone when you are not speaking. Members of the Finance Committee wishing to speak shall raise their hand using the Zoom function and will only speak when they are called upon by the chair. When you are recognized, please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Ensuring public access to remote meetings does not ensure public comment or public participation. This meeting will not feature a public comment portion. Those wishing to provide comments to the Finance Committee, however, are encouraged to do so by emailing our Executive Secretary, Micaiah Healy, at town.arlington.ma.us. That's mhealy@town.arlington.ma.us. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this Finance Committee will be available on the town's website. And lastly, I just want to remind people that as required by law, every vote we take will be by roll call. With that, let's dispose of our first item on our agenda, which is the minutes. The minutes of February 9th. Thank you, Sophie, for putting those, Micaiah for putting those out. Does anyone have any revisions or changes to the minutes of February 9th? If not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 9th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion, comments, or questions on the minutes before we take a vote to approve? All right, when I call your name, if you approve, say yes. If you don't, say no. And if you abstain, say abstain. Starting with Paul Bear,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Carolyn is not here. Rebecca,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Michael Ruderman, Charlie Foskett, I see Michael Ruderman. Michael, do you
Just
hear?
reestablished connection, yes, yes on the minutes.
Okay. Chuck,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
Christopher Hyam. Peggy is absent. Al Tosti,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Dean Carmen is not here, and David McKenna.
Yes.
I believe those are unanimous. All right. Having dispensed with that, we will move on to our main item of business tonight, the override. All right. I'll start us off by just summarizing where we are and where we've been. At the conclusion of last town meeting back in May, this past spring, the town was facing a deficit of $13.5 million in FY 27, 21.5 million in FY 28, 24.8 million in FY 29. Throughout the summer, the fall, and the early part of this winter, the Long Range Planning Committee, on which I and several others from this committee were involved in, met to address these deficits. This lengthy process resulted, among other things, and I'm summarizing here, in an agreement by the schools to fold their special ed budget into the general ed budget and to keep growth for the next 3 years to 4%, while at the same time, the town's side agreed to keep its spending to a 3.25% growth rate for the next 3 years. In addition to that, both the town manager and the school superintendent made significant cuts in their budgets to reduce these deficits even further. So what we have now, after this process, is a projected deficit in FY 27 of 2.7 million. So the 13.5 million has been reduced to a $2.7 million deficit next year. In FY 28, it's been reduced to 17.8 million, and FY 29 to 24.4 million. And at this point, I want to say, personally, I think the town manager and the superintendent are both to be commended for their work in reducing what was a significant budget deficit for the next 3 years. Nevertheless, we still have significant deficits. And as I'm sure you all know, on February 12th, the select board voted to put a $14.8 million override on the ballot for the town election on March 28th. And the school committee has voted to endorse that amount, and I believe both votes were unanimous. If this $14.8 million override succeeds, and there are no other changes in expenses or revenues, we will be left with a a projected small surplus of something like $9,000 in FY '29. That will leave us still at that point with very significant deficits in FY '30 at 14 million and FY '31 at 19.5 million. So this $14.8 million override will just get us through 3 years, and we're going to be facing big deficits again in year 4. The $14.8 million override will cost on average an additional $1,030 to the average household in Arlington, on top of the 2.5% increases that everyone will pay per normal for the next 3 years and years after that as well. The town manager has prepared a list of expected cuts that he will propose if the override fails. That has been circulated to the committee, and I think it's been circulated around town as well. Some may think, though, these cuts are drastic and catastrophic and draconian. Others may think even if the override passes, there should be some of these cuts instituted. We can all talk about that in our discussion today. As the Finance Committee has on previous overrides, with respect to previous overrides, tonight we will discuss and debate the issue as to whether or not we as a committee want to support the override or not. Before we launch into that discussion, I just want to point out, just remind people that bar none, every person in this meeting has the town's best interests at heart. Remember that as you speak and listen to each other, and keep in mind that our job is to protect the financial security of the town and not necessarily to protect any particular program or department or whatever. We have to look at the big picture. With that, I'll start opening this up to debate, but first I would entertain a motion to support a $14.8 million override. And at the end of the discussion that we have, we will vote on that motion up or down.
So moved.
Is there- All right, we have a motion. It's been seconded. Let's talk about the override. Who would like to go first? I see John's hand raised, but I will recognize you, but use your Zoom hand raising. But go ahead, John.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. I was on the Finance Committee 3 years ago, and when they had the last override vote, and I think I saw, I didn't vote for every budget that year, but it was very clear that we were facing a deficit, and as a municipality, we have to pay our bills. So I was all set to vote for that override. Then simultaneously with that override, the selectmen agreed to some commitments to the schools, where, as I saw it, they basically committed to giving the schools an additional $7 million going forward. And I was up from the day one, I was very upset with that. And that actually caused me not to vote for that override back 3 years ago, because to me, it's just $7 million deficit. That's a negative $7 million plus $7 million that you're asking for the taxpayers, and then minus $7 million that you're promising. So it gets you right back into a deficit. So here we are 3 years later. And I said, all right, this isn't going to happen again. I'm going to do my best to stay on top of this. I've attended a few long-range planning meetings. I go to the FinCom meetings. I ask questions, learn as much as I can. At the long-range planning committee, I said, no, there's no commitments here, right? I understand that, we're providing great services and everybody's working very hard to keep these numbers down. And I don't take anything away from all the effort that was put in. There's an enormous amount of effort that was put in. And we also have incredibly dedicated town employees. We're so lucky to have such a great town manager and school superintendent that's so dedicated and committed. But I asked at the long range planning, there's no commitments here, right? And So I guess, like I said, I didn't, same as it was 3 years ago, I didn't vote for all the budgets, but the town has to pay its bills and we're doing our best to keep these costs down. So I was ready to vote for this. Um, and then I just opened up my emails today and I saw, okay, here are the commitments. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. I thought there were no commitments. Maybe this is just a formality. Like we'll work hard and do our best. Okay, that's fine. But these commitments say that we will increase the school's budget for the next 3 years by 4% annually. We will increase general government operating budget by 3.25% annually. So stop the presses. That's tonight. If we approve those commitments, we are not only approving this override, we are approving an override in 3 years. Because how else are you going to increase the school's budget by 4% over the next 3 years and the town's budget by 3.25% over the next 3 years without an override in 3 years? People have done so much work in this, and the town is relying on this, and I understand that, but it's a very, very important decision. I request that we ask for clarification on these commitments. A, are they binding? B, are they guidelines? C, I saw one newspaper today reported that it was a cap. In other words, it's not going to go over 4%. So I think we need clarification on these commitments. Because otherwise we're voting, because if it's as it reads that the school is promised tonight we are promising the school a 4% increase over the next 3 years, then guess what? We are voting for two overrides tonight. The one for this year and the one in FY30, and I am not ready to vote for an override for FY30. So I move that we pause the vote until we get clarification on these commitments, or possibly in the alternative. Yeah, so I'm going to move that we pause this vote until we get clarification on these commitments.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. What type of clarification are you looking for, John?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think it's clear that what the select board is proposing is an override of a certain amount
Yep.
that will permit
Yep.
the town side to grow by 3.25% and will permit the school side to grow 4%.
So is it
For the next 3
binding?
years.
Are we committing to the school? So let's just say insurance rates or pension rates go up much higher than expected, or let's just say there's a capital need that wasn't anticipated. Does that mean that we have to come up with that money to fill that shortfall without, and also increase the school budget by 4% every year? In other words, keep it simple, is it binding? Is it binding? Because I was told, I didn't think the last one was. People told me over and over again that it was. I didn't think it was. I actually called up the state council. I said, do we have to, honor these commitments that really are just attachments to the board votes? And they said no. But I want clarification as to whether or not this 4% increase over the next 3 years is binding.
John, I think this is the bargain that the select board is making to the voter. And if there is something catastrophic, like insurance going up or some other major expense that will have to be paid for within the budget that we have for the 3 years going forward. All right, let's go on to Rebecca. I see that you've had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was planning to speak to the override in general, but first I would also just respond to John's point. I think that this is very challenging, this idea of what does it mean to be binding and so forth. And I agree with your point, John, that it's not binding in the sense that we're legally required to do it. But I think that some people, myself included, believe that if the voters were told, outside of the technical language of the ballot, if the voters are told this will be the tax increase and these will be the consequences, this is what we're going to do with your tax money, that it's not what we want to do, to raise the taxes and then don't give the people what they felt that they were voting their taxes for. So I understand your point about it being not technically binding, but my feeling is, barring emergencies, we do want to stick to the commitments that the select board has laid out. Now, as far as the override in general, I'm going to be supporting this, I think, because as we've talked through the budgets, I'm pretty confident that if the override were to fail, we really would be seeing cuts in services in pretty significant ways. And my interpretation of the voters' will when they have chosen this select board and this school committee is that they appreciate the judgment of the select board and the school committee with the services that we have now. I think they've done some hard work in minimizing the increases, but we all know that there are increases due to health insurance and, union negotiated salary increases and things like that. So I think it will be up to the voters to decide if they would prefer service cuts and a smaller tax increase, then that's what they will have before them. But I think I'm confident that all the work that the town leadership has done and that we've done on this finance committee has shown us that we can't somehow maintain our services without an override. Thank you.
All right, Annie.
Well, so I agree with Rebecca, obviously. I support this override. I think the services are important to us. I've been on the long range planning committee through this cycle, and I think the town manager and the superintendent have done their very best to reduce their budgets without damaging the services that we provide to our citizens. I understand John's concern. What I would say is that from my experience being on the select board through the first two overrides and those sets of commitments, that what the commitments to those caps on the budgets for the town and schools mean is that the towns and schools are going to live within those caps regardless of what happens. So the schools are going to get a 4% increase in their revenue regardless of what happens to their costs, and they have to make it work and may have to make cuts in the interim in order to meet that cap. And similarly on the town side. So there are things that are outside of those caps that are not mentioned in the commitments, but we know from the long range plan that they have different assumed planning increases. And in this case, we are looking at healthcare going up considerably more than that, but it's covered in this override. And pensions go up 5% a year or more. And we know that our solid waste or trash disposal at this point is going up 5% a year. And so the budget's been carefully balanced around the understanding of those drivers. So none of those drivers are going to be the thing that breaks the budget. But if, for example, we are off on our healthcare costs, then we will have to cut other things in order to stay within these budgets because we cannot go back to the voters and ask for more money. So this is the packet, it's the cap. That's what those commitments mean. So in some sense, they don't mean, oh, the schools are going to get 4% every year. They mean the schools will get a certain amount of money to work with, and they will have to make their expenses meet that certain amount of money. And if other drivers push up, like special education costs or whatever, then the schools have got to make a plan that works around those expenses. They have to pay what they're required to pay, and they have to look at their optional spending in order to, or discretionary spending in order to make the budget balance. We are looking at the potential for catastrophic cuts if we do not pass this override. One of the reasons that I asked John about whether or not on the fire department, if we were missing those 4 firefighters whose positions are vacant, were we still going to meet the national standard for response time, is because I was concerned that if we have to cut those 4 positions, we might not. It sounds like we will, but if we have to cut more positions than that out of the fire department, our response time to house fires will increase. Do we have 10 house fires a year? No, but we have some. And you're looking at the potential for a bigger loss of property and for less confidence in our safety systems if we're not able to meet those response times. That's just one example of the many effects that not passing this override would have on the services that people are receiving because of the cuts we need to make, not in 27, but in 28 and 29. The thing to remember is that this is a $14.8 million ask. If we are lucky enough to get this ask, then we know what we're going to be doing for the next 3 years, what services we're going to be providing, et cetera. If we don't get this ask, the chances are really good that we're going to come back and have to ask, first of all, for less and make the deeper cuts in any regard. So even if we're able to come back later and ask for a lower override, we're still going to end up making deep cuts because of how this all multiplies out. So I would hope that we, as a committee, will support the work that the select board and the school committee and the town manager and the superintendent have done, and the proposal that they have made that will preserve critical services for the residents of the town and critical services for the students in our schools. Thank you.
Chuck.
Hi, I tend to agree with John. Oh, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
Agree with John. I think those parameters, 4%, 3.25%, they seem pretty like this is what it's going to be. And I think that removes the discretion for the liquidity of the money. For example, if health insurance goes up it goes up a lot higher than we anticipate, then we may not be able to afford the 4%, the 3.25%. So I think we should qualify those statements. I didn't see maximum in the language of the school budget increase. I just saw 4%. So I think we should be more emphatic about the point that the maximum budget increase will be this pending other costs that we have to manage. The only thing that's capped is the 14.8, and I think we need discretion within that whole dollar amount to cover costs that we don't have control over. The additional point I'll make is it would be good to commit to make a statement about committing to additional cuts. We're even passing the override, but we will continue to look to find efficiencies, and I think. I know there's efficiencies that we can gain. Even statements like we only bring on essential hires. Because I think there's a lot of discretionary hires that we bring on that aren't essential. So I would like to see some of those controls put in place to at least mitigate what's going to happen in 3 years, because it will happen again in 3 years. So I wanted to share that perspective.
Let me play in terms of trying to foster some discussion. Let me play devil's advocate now and then. And right now I would respond to Chuck by saying we have if the override passes at 14.8 million, that's the cap. We, as the finance committee and town meeting, can say, we don't want you to spend all that money. So that exists, and that's our job, and that's town meeting's job. So we could, as Chuck points out, and I'll be honest, I think there is room for efficiencies in our budgets. And it's not one or the other, it's both. We can have a cap and still work on efficiencies at the same time. Do you want to respond to what I just said, Chuck?
Yeah, but have you seen a statement about that?
Well, it's in the creation of the finance committee and the creation of town meeting as the appropriating body.
Yeah, but I think we need the town manager to say, like, look at it. A year ago, it's my second year in the committee. A year ago, I asked him about hiring freeze, and he said no. Then this year, have a hiring freeze, and then we asked, well, are you going to have a hiring freeze or some type of qualified freeze, essential hires, or something that would control the head count, because this is all about the head count. And he didn't say no. He said no. And it would be good to give people a little bit more comfort that we're going to try to aggressively manage our costs by providing a statement like that. And I don't think we've heard that. We've only heard controlled increases of the town and the schools, without those qualifying statements I referred to, saying this is the hope is 4%, because who knows what insurance is going to do. So, or what if we have, God forbid, what if we have another cyber attack? We got away lucky with 500K. That could be a $10 million attack. So if those things happen, we can't commit to a 4% school increase. So I think we need to qualify those statements, and I think we have to make statements about looking for more efficiencies. So
Thank
that's
you. Michael.
Thank you. Checking volume. Can everyone hear me?
Michael, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, please come back to me then.
We still can't hear you, Michael. Can't hear you at all, Michael. Michael, I'll come back to you. Maybe you can figure it out in the meantime. Carolyn.
Okay, hello. The reason I seconded John's motion or request was that I'm very concerned that we are telling people we're doubling the size of the override. And yes, as finance committee members, most of us knew it was going up to at least 10. But I was shocked when I saw that we were requesting another override in 3 years. That to me is just bonkers, that we would double the override now and then claim we're doing another override in 3 years. Now, I know we extend that, but Christine, I like the idea of telling them they have to withhold $3 million of that now to extend the override for another, till at least 5 years. I will not let this vote go unanimous among this group, but I will probably let it pass. There are 2 things I'm going to recommend. Actually, before I say that and before I forget, the town managers, directors were all asked to set their budget for a 10% increase in health insurance. So, Chuck, just to answer your question, that's already baked into the budget. And I think that's probably a good number. I learned that the other day. Maybe other people here already knew that. But back to my other thought, I think we're at the point of 2 things. One, asking our state reps to consider voting to have or putting something forward to have Proposition 2.5 become Proposition 3.5. Because the reality is that's what all of the residential towns are having to do. Because if you don't have commercial industry in your town, you can only rely on the residents to do that. So that's one thing. The other thing I think we should be asking our town manager and the department heads to do is start to figuring out ways to improve scope and scale by combining with Belmont and Winchester. Because again, those are towns that are adjacent to us with only residential tax bases, and there are probably ways that we can improve efficiencies by having departments or certain aspects of our towns run across the 3 towns. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Michael, are you back on?
I hope so. Can you hear me now?
It's very
No.
faint.
Michael, can you take off your headphones, turn off and see if that does it? And now I'll turn off my mic.
Sorry, any better now?
No.
About the same.
We'll go on to Charlie right now, and I'll come back to you again, Michael. Charlie, go ahead.
Is this working at all?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Nothing now?
Let me first make a couple of comments, Madam Chair, if I may, on your devil's advocate position. You know, the idea that the finance committee might tell the town not to spend certain amounts of money next year if the override is passed this year flies in the face of past practice. every time we deal with a budget, we hear the mantra from, people throughout the town government, but also certain people on this committee who say, well, the citizens voted for this, so we have to spend it. So there's no inherent philosophy or emotion towards the finance committee actually reducing budgets below the 5-year, the quote unquote 5-year plan. Efficiencies are not. Efficiency is a word that people seem to have forgotten in the lexicon in Arlington. I furthermore would suggest that it is the serious responsibility of the finance committee to consider rejecting this proposed override. That's advice to the taxpayers. It's not simply our obligation to vote for the override and quote unquote preserve services. We also might want to consider preserving or recommending to the taxpayers to preserve their the amount of money they have to spend on taxes. I have my observation is that the town in the past years has been relatively disciplined in what they spend. The town has stuck to about a 3.25% growth as long as I can remember. On the other hand, it's my opinion that the school department has spent money with total abandonment. I will point out that in the I want to say fiscal year 21 to 22, I might be off by a year. I sometimes get confused between the calendar year and the fiscal year, but it was the last year of Superintendent Bodie's tenure and before Superintendent Holman joined the department. At that time, the school department hired between 60 and 90 people out of budget, over the budget. And it's right in their records that they had budgeted something like 965 people and they hired 1,000 and some people. And if you compare the 21 the 22 budget to the 22 actual in the next year, you'll find out that they went over the personnel headcount in that year as well. Now, why do I bring this up? Because those people are in the base. I don't know what that was a year when the school went and the hiring, the workforce in the school department increased by 11.5%. And they're in the base. So we're growing this 4% on top of these people, and I don't know what they're there for. It's never been explained. And on top of that, my understanding is the school department is hiring 6 new vice principals in the school system. So we're not exercising on the school side fiscal discipline. We're just saying, okay, we're going to not grow quite. We're not going to spend quite as much as we spent before, but we're still going to spend more. Now we have dealt with this spending problem in the school system for decades. If you go back and look at the DESE reports, for the last, I want to say 7 or 8 years, the SPED spending has been somewhere, let's say 3.5% growth to 5% growth a year, and the school department has invariably said they have to have 7% a year. Now that they've now said since, and by the way, that spending rate has dropped, and now they're going to say, well, we'll no longer separate the SPED from the regular spending, and the reason is because they don't want to be called to account for the lower cost on the special education programs. Similarly, year after year, we have heard the mantra from the school department that we have a student population growth. growth factor that we have to contend with. And the solution to that was to increase the school budget every year by 50% of the prior year's certified cost of education. And you know, that's typically over the years it's been $13,000 to $15,000. Cut it in half, so you're increasing the school budget by $7,000 or so for every teacher. Now, when we got to the pandemic, suddenly the school population dropped, and the school department had to face the fact that the population growth factor was going in the other direction. It was shrinking, not expanding, and indeed they cut the budget to meet that commitment, because that was a commitment made by members of the school board to the finance committee when that algorithm was installed. So now this is being abandoned. But strategically, why is it being abandoned? It's being abandoned because the school population growth is flattening, and so they can't guarantee, they just can't grow things based on this population growth factor. So let's come up with a different formula. So I have to say that I'm very disenchanted, is putting it mildly, with the spending philosophy in the school department and the 4% growth. And I would like to see both the town and the school side rethink their strategic spending over the long haul, and you know, lower the rates from well, let's put it this way: even with a 4% growth, our 5-year growth rate in the tax per capita tax in the town has been growing at about 4.85 or 4.9%. If you look at the growth factor on the tax rate in the 5-year plan that we're being asked to approve with the override, if my memory serves me right, the tax growth is 5.6%, 5.7% over that 3-year period, leaving the bank empty, leaving the treasury empty at the end of those 3 years. So this is not what I would call prudent planning. It's not prudent spending, and it's not focusing on efficiency. It's focusing on spending more money, and 3 years going back to the taxpayer, getting another slug of $15 million to take us 3 more years. Somewhere along the line, this has to stop, and I cannot support the override that's being presented to us.
Thank you, Charlie. Alan Tosti.
Yes, thank you. A couple of things that I'd want to emphasize. I attended almost all of the Long Range Planning Committee meetings over the last 6 months. And I watched as the 5-year plan evolved. As the plan, and it started off thinking there was going to be a override necessary of around $22 million. Well, as the plan became less conservative, the override amount dropped. And I think at some point the manager went to the selectmen looking for about a $17 million override. And the selectmen said no. And so they went back to the drawing board in this. And at this point, the schools came with a consolidated 4.25%, getting rid of the growth in students, getting rid of the 7%, or actually 6.5% special ed. Now, some of that was because of the reasons that Charlie had just mentioned. But I think overall, it did bring down what the schools could increase. I wasn't that impressed, but then they dropped it further to 4%. And I thought that made a difference. First of all, the 4% is what was originally going to go up back in 2005 when this whole 5-year plan started. And that was acceptable at that point. So I started off in a very negative way, but as the changes were made, some of which I didn't think were that good, as far as the conservative nature of the plan. But then as I sat down and went through, as people were going through the budgets and saw the reductions the manager was making in expenses, committees and commissions, quite often, we're not talking a lot of money, but they were coming down. I was feeling a little bit more favorable to it. But I guess the final thing that swung me in favor of the override was that if we don't do it, see the override really, the last several overrides were called 3-year overrides, but they were really 2-year overrides because they didn't need an override the first year. And so they built up cash, and that allowed to get through the next 3 years, the next 2 years. By bringing down the amount of the deficit in fiscal 27 next year, in effect, they've done the same thing. They've allowed to accumulate enough money to get us through for the 3 years by bringing down the 27 override. So it's sort of been following the same pattern as we've done in the past. But if this override fails, the cuts in 27 are probably doable, but we're going to have to come back next year with another override. And then we'll take a look at the 3-year deficits for 28, 29, and 30. And the override's going to have to be over 20 million, which has, in my opinion, no shot of success. So we're starting to look at really substantial cuts in the budget. So I think we need the override this year because it has the best chance of passing, because it's 14.8, which is less than 10% of an increase as far as percentage wise. So I think we have no choice. I think to expect pass an override next year, the following year with a $20 or $22 million override will never pass. And we're going to be faced with really substantial cuts. So I've sort of turned myself around. I'm going to support the override and hope that the rest of the Finance Committee does also. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Paul Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the issue of commitments to efficiencies, the Select Board, with their override vote, did put out a memo or a document with their commitments, and it includes a whole set of things in the second section of their commitments, which include pursue new revenue sources, seek efficiencies in all areas, continue to aggressively pursue external grant and earmark opportunities. So there is a commitment, at least stated commitment, to working to increase the efficiency in the town government. As far as commitments go, we could, if we so choose today, make a motion and pass a resolution to support the override, but we can say our own ideas of commitments in there. We can say that the 4% is a maximum cap and that the 3.25% is a cap. And the fact is, no matter what the Select Board or us commit to in this override campaign, ultimately the town budget every single year is determined by town meeting. And every year town meeting can choose to cut the town budget to any level they want. So it's ultimately their responsibility or their right to rein in the spending. And one other note, I sent some of this information along to the Precinct 1 town meeting members. to keep them abreast of the budget situation. And I have gotten back from town meeting members, from 6 different town meeting members, I've gotten responses, and all of them are supporting the override. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ellen Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do accept that our structural deficit's real and largely unavoidable, and I can reluctantly support this override as more or less unavoidable. But I do have similar concerns about the language of the commitments that the select board voted on. If the voters interpret those commitments as we are going to grow the school and town budgets by the 4%, 3.25% to maintain some level of services. But then if we have increases in, say, insurance or Minuteman that we don't have any control over, but those are outside of the 4% and 3.25%, we've got a problem. So I'd almost rather have the bottom line expenditures, a commitment to the bottom line expenditures as in the projection, rather than those 2 line items, which aren't the entire budget. I'd also like to see a commitment, as Paul mentioned, there's a commitment to look for grants and efficiencies and things like that. I would like to have a commitment that if we have any savings or additional revenue, maybe unexpected state aid, that we apply those to reducing the future deficits, not spend them, not increase our budget by them, but push that additional money out. And then I've also had a question already by a constituent, if the no override before 2030 includes debt exclusion overrides, because everyone's talking about the autism. So, and that's a question I couldn't answer. I'd like to know that. So my question for the chair is if it would be possible or appropriate for the Finance Committee, if it chooses, to make some sort of recommendation that would be conditional on additional commitments or clarifications of the commitments, so that some of these questions are answered. Thank you.
Well, the body can do what the majority of the body wants to do. I will point out that we have an election, that this is on the ballot in a month, and time is passing very quickly. And I think it will be difficult to get the information we want or the commitments that various people tonight have said they want, and some of them are not always consistent with one another. So practically speaking, we can do whatever we want, but practically speaking, I don't know what that will get us at the end of the day. Josh.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to tie into what you were just saying and Alan was saying, does anybody know off the top of their head what debt exclusions might be rolling off the tax rolls in the coming few years? Are any of them? Anybody know?
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay, all right. I certainly at some point there are going to be some that are paid off. I have a few comments to make, and I guess I've made these other years as well. I think it's certainly, I hope it's not a shock to anybody that we're in this position we're in now. We have a 5-year planning process. We've had a 5-year planning process for probably the last 30 years or so, 25 years anyway. It projects, deficits that are looming. Generally, with our override processes, since the beginning of the 5-year plan, we try and accumulate money at the beginning and spend it down at the end. And so we commit that it's going to last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. And in general, in terms of those broad commitments, I think we've been extremely successful as a town. I don't think we've ever gone back and asked for another override before that the promised time has elapsed. And that's just, part of, you say, okay, well, are they just going to go and spend all the money they have? We're giving them all this money. That hasn't been the history. In general, we've been conservative, and overrides have lasted longer than we've promised the voters. The reason that we know that it's going to happen is because we have this kind of built-in structural deficit. If we look at all the budgets we're approving, and what we're looking at is just the town budget so far, I look at the salary lines, and by and large, all the salary lines go up more than 2.5%. They go up more than 3%. And that's based on cost of living, steps and lanes, the kinds of things that all municipal salaries, not just Arlington, that's the way municipal salaries are paid. We could say, oh, well, we don't want to do that. We don't want to increase the salaries. And, we could perhaps reduce school services, and then maybe people wouldn't choose to come to our schools. Maybe people would feel that our response time in our fire department, and I think the response time is really not critically in terms of fire, which is pretty rare, but our unfortunate neighbors who may have a medical emergency that requires response time, in less than 5 minutes to mean that they're going to live another day. So all those things are different cuts that different people in our town will value. I think that I'm a little frustrated that I think if you really don't support the override and you really think that our town should be more efficient, then really we should be voting down each budget that we see that comes our way. If you feel that way, I don't feel that way, but if you do feel that way, because you should be asking that they all get cut by 10% right now, this year, next year, last year. But that's not the way we do it. We have this plan. There are a whole group of people that work very hard to, work it out. If we're at 4% for the schools, that's not like it's not a giveaway budget. If a couple of students move into town, they could have special ed costs that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you had 3 students like that, that's another $1 million. There's just all sorts of unforeseen things happen. And we could say, oh, well, I make do in my house. If I don't have enough money, maybe I don't fix the roof. Well, that was probably stupid because I'm going to have other damage, but maybe I don't go out to dinner so much. Well, that's fine. Or maybe my class sizes swell from 22 in a kindergarten to 28. Okay, and then again, we have this problem that maybe families don't want to move here because our school system, that's not such a great thing. So the voters have a choice. They can decide whether they want a town that's vibrant and is attracting people, or they could have a town that, doesn't pass an override and cuts their services and, starts to shrink. So obviously we have that choice. I think, Charlie, in terms of, again, for people who don't know it, I'm one of the members who works with the school committee on the budget. In this budget coming down 4%, they are cutting a bunch of FTEs this year, and they are reorganizing, and they are trying to be more efficient. They're trying to avoid having things like class sizes go up or cut social workers or reduce things that there are really what they believe are critical services that are provided. And I agree with, actually. I think that finally, I could say that as I said before, we are a well-managed town. Our organization, the finance committee, is a critical part of that. We have increased our spending over the last couple of years, and that was partly due to a commitment to the voters that we want to kind of increase where we compare ourselves to our peer communities. We were in the lower quarter on some of those different metrics, and so we consciously tried to raise those salaries up, let's say for teaching aides and things like that. So it's not like, oh yeah, here's some money, go spend it, it's a party. I think that's not an accurate description of the school department or of the town. We're going to need another override in 3 years. That's not a shock. That's part of the 5-year plan. Please don't be shocked that this override that we're projecting for 3 years runs out in 3 years. That's what we're planning. Maybe we can be more efficient. Maybe we get a few new special ed students. Maybe health insurance goes up. Maybe the town hall burns down. There's all sorts of things that could happen. And I would hope that if we have something that's really difficult, that we don't say, oh, well, sorry, that's life. I think I had a bunch of other things to say, but I think I'll just wrap up saying that I agree that the voters, nobody wants to ask people for more money, but I think that our neighbors have elected people that feel like that the services that are provided in the town make it a vibrant and attractive town, vibrant and attractive schools. And I think mostly that's a plus. We have to ask people to pay for it. You could say $1,000 a year. I could say $90 a month. I could say, you know, again, that's a lot of money for some people, but it just kind of puts in perspective, I think. And finally, you know, we can certainly work smarter. We can be more efficient in how we spend our money, but we don't have the ability to create a new product or, you know, create something that's going to suddenly swell our revenue. The only thing that we can do to grow our revenue is to increase our housing stock, increase our basis. So, you know, there are people that are advocating for that. If you want our revenue to go up, then you should be on board with that as well. So I hope you'll support the override. I think it's part of a plan. It's part of something that a lot of people have worked on. And again, it's not, and as Al said, it's something where we started with a pretty high number, and people have made cuts and an effort to get things under control. Thanks.
Daryl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, I'll say up front, I'm a pretty emphatic vote in support of the override, not because I'm thrilled with having to pay an additional $1,000 a year, but as many of you have spoken before me have said, I don't believe we have a choice. I think a lot of this is driven by the infamous structural deficit, and we don't have any control over that. And while I am, very supportive of directives, recommendations, whatever, to try to identify more efficiencies, I think in general, most of those would be at the margins. And if we really need to look at significant savings, it would have to be something done much, choice of the word, much more structural, that impacts, that affects a lot of other municipalities in the state as well. It isn't just Arlington. I'll speak to the piece of the budget that I know the best. I've been the Finance Committee's representative to the Capital Planning Committee for the past 4 years. And every year it gets harder and harder to evaluate the critical requests we get and turn down ones that everybody agrees we need, because we're limited to 5% of the town budget. I read a document that Paul, thank you for sending that out this afternoon, sent the town manager's list of cuts, and I was appalled by the impact its cuts would have in fiscal 28 and 29. And to be honest, that's starting to turn Arlington to the direction of a town that I'm not sure I really would want to live in. I think the end of the letter was something like, and we would get to the point where Arlington would only be able to provide basic services. And I think people sort of would need to come to terms with what that actually would mean. So since many of you have spoken before me, I've already made a lot of the points I was going to make. I'll cut it short, just that I too am a yes vote, and encourage others to see it the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Michael, do you have a voice now?
Hope so. Can you hear me now?
Very little.
All right, let me try speaking like this. Is this any better?
Well, go ahead and try, and we'll see what we can cipher.
I can hear you just fine. As our chair has said, there really is only one question in front of us. We could ask for promises and guardrails and commitments into the future, but they're not there. They're not being offered to us, and practically there really isn't the time to get them. And how could we ever make them binding on future administrations, future town meetings? I don't think we can. We have a budget that is famously referred to as is in a situation of structural deficit. I think the way we speak about it is somewhat disingenuous to ourselves. We have structured it to be in deficit. We are somewhat disingenuous to ourselves when we talk about needing to ask the voters for an override every 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, because we intentionally overshoot whatever the first year's, second year's, third year's needs to balance the budget are by asking the voters to increase their taxes by way more than that first or second year needs, so that we will have a surplus. It has come to the point where we live in a succession of
you just lost your mic.
Yeah, Michael, we were hearing you for a little bit and then we lost you.
Sorry, I've got a bad connection on my end. I'll wrap it up pretty quickly. This is unsustainable. Anything we want to try to ensure about Arlington being a town which welcomes new residents stands on whether or not they can afford to live here. And my final point is that we are, in a sense, erecting a gated community in terms of wealth. And we are saying goodbye to the people who cannot afford to live here. And we are only making the town available to people who can spend an ever increasing amount of money on the basics of town administration. It seems like we never talk about budget restriction until we are faced with, the metaphorical gun to concentrate our attention. So I will say no. And I will say it is not the apocalypse if we vote no. We can say no. And I think that is our recommended course.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you for persevering. I think we heard at least 90% of what you were saying. So thank you again. At this point, Jordan, you had your hand up?
I did. I'm sorry. I accidentally unclicked it. But Madam Chair, if you're calling on me, I'm happy to speak.
Yes, everyone else has already spoken once before, and right now I'll entertain anyone who hasn't spoken before I go back to people who have. So the floor is yours, Jordan.
Great. So I think I came into this meeting and I was ready to vote no on recommending. I think, Michael, you just pretty much touched upon most of what my thoughts were. I think I have a really hard time recommending to voters that, that this budget is sustainable, given the fact that this continues to be a structural deficit. And, this is overrides are supposed to be for, extraordinary circumstances, keeping the lights on, making sure teachers don't get fired. And I think in the last override, we'd kind of seen an expansion of services. I think almost $15 million is quite a substantial amount. So I was really ready to vote no, but I think Al Tosti probably made the best case for why I think I'm probably going to vote yes. And that's because if we don't do it this year, then it's likely going to still be an issue next year, and it's only going to be more expensive. So I'm sort of reluctantly leaning towards yes, but I think it's nice that the select board puts in writing commitments, but I think one of the commitments that I'd kind of would like to see, or at least discussed more, is, some sort of a commitment to not substantially increasing and just, the types of services we provide, or trying to find, efficiencies are tossed around a lot as a phrase, but, trying to find ways of, not increasing, whether it's personnel or spending in certain areas. It seems like just trying to maintain where we are. 3 years ago when I voted for this, we're kind of right back to where we are now. But just, I guess, kind of in summary of, so we can move on, I'll just wrap it up by saying, I'm probably going to end up voting yes, just knowing that, it's going to be much worse next year. And I think I would rather take I would rather take what's known right now than the uncertainty next year, knowing that there's going to be more cuts now, and next year it's only going to be worse. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Jordan. Sophie.
Hi. Can you see? Okay. So I think I appreciate Jordan's sort of quick summary there, and I'm probably in a similar position, but more along the lines of Caroline, where I think it has to pass, but I'm very concerned that we're not addressing any of the structural deficits, and I think we really need to. And so I won't be voting in favor because I don't want to show a unanimous support of just continuing as is. That we need to make a change, and I appreciate Josh's point of, well, maybe we should be voting down all the individual budgets as they come before us. But it's really hard on an individual budget to address a structural deficit where we have no control over union negotiations on COLA and steps, et cetera. That's where the problem is. It's not on my town budgets. It's not the town clerk's office that I can fix a structural deficit. So there's no point in me voting that one down. They're doing the best they can with what they have. So I think this override is a time where we can address the fact that we have objections to a lot of things that don't often come before us, such as the structural deficit. And so I will be voting no, not because I don't think we need it, because we need it, but we have a problem, I guess. So that's where I am.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. I see several hands up, but if anyone who has not spoken yet would like to speak, raise your hand. All right, I don't see any. Carolyn, you're up next.
So just quickly, people have mentioned, well, if Minuteman goes up or insurance goes up, then we're sort of sunk. And my answer to that is no, those are operating costs. And so therefore something needs to be cut to make up the difference. If a building catches fire, well, then we have an override for that. But if Minuteman and insurance go up, then we need to figure out something or some things that need to be cut. So I don't really agree with that argument. That's it.
You are correct. We have to have a balanced budget. So if expenses go up, something has to go down.
Right.
And that's what the town manager will have to do. That's what the superintendent will have to do. And that's what we do on the finance committee and recommend to town meeting. We have to have a balanced budget. So if unexpected expenses arise, there are going to be cuts. Chuck.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to provide some data. Josh brought it up. He didn't know where we were from a debt position. The town has $400 million in debt right now, so it won't be retired anytime soon. And second point I'll make is that we're still AAA or S&P.
Mm-hmm.
S&P is factoring debt more into their ratings. But there's nothing to conclude from that yet, but they are looking more closely at debt. So if we did incur more, then we'd get a closer look.
Thanks, Chuck. Paul.
Thank you. And again, on Josh's question on the debt, the 5-year plan shows that the debt service cost each year is going down by only about 1% every year. Thank you.
Annie.
So I want to address a little bit of the history of override commitments. We have always made commitments, and those commitments have always been similar to the ones that we've made this year. And for the most part, we keep them. When we passed the first override in 2005 that was passed on the basis of multi-year and a plan. I stood up at a budget and revenue task force meeting and said, this budget will force cuts over those 5 years, and it did, because of those caps. So what happens with a budget like this is that if you look at the 5-year plan, everything has an escalator. We have an estimated escalator for health insurance, an estimated escalator for the pensions, so on and so forth. If we, for example, have a market crash and we need to fund our pensions by 2042 and we need to increase that investment every year, then we are going to have to cut something else in order to stay within the total override commitment, which is we're raising your taxes to make this 14.8 million, to add that to the base, and we're going to stay at that for 3 years. So that is the driver of efficiencies for the next 3 years. In some sense, we can't go over that. It is possible for us as a finance committee, obviously, to cut the budgets that we propose. One of the reasons that I asked John about whether or not those 4 vacant positions would affect our response time to house fires was because I wanted everybody to understand we can cut those 4 positions, but nobody made the motion to cut those 4 positions as a way of reducing this override or future overrides. And we could do that with every single one of our budgets. This is our budget. So it's not true that we can't attack the structural deficits by cutting our budgets. What is true is that we go over these budgets in detail, and we all know that our individual budgets, the ones that we each review, are pretty lean. What we can't attack are the large structural drivers outside of those individual budgets, one of which is healthcare, which does not go up at 2.5% a year. And one of which is our pension obligations, which we're required by law to fully fund, even though we could pay as you go those pensions for about a quarter of what we are currently investing in them. So we have budget drivers out of our control that create our structural deficit. And the only way to cut healthcare is to cut personnel. And that means cutting services, because 80% of our budget is personnel, and those are the people who are delivering those services. So it's very difficult for us to cut this budget without saying to people, we're going to cut the services that you're receiving. And part of the reason that I support overrides isn't because I want people's taxes to go up, or I want to drive people out of town, or I want to do all of these things that, everybody says you're doing when you raise taxes. Part of the reason I do that is because I want the voters to decide whether or not they want their services cut. And so those cuts are out there, and the voters know what it is that they will be choosing. And if they choose to cut their services by turning down this override, then we will have to do that work in conjunction with the town management and the select board and so on and so forth. But I don't think that we should be voting to take away from the voters their option to decide what they want. We're not funding a growing service budget here. We're funding a level service budget with costs that go up more than 2.5% a year. And that's why we do overrides. It's not about profligate spending. It's about lack of control of our revenue. And in fact, we're very disciplined about this, because we set we have this long range plan, and we set these caps, and we estimate our revenue, and we stay within those limiters. And the only increase in fiscal discipline that we could have that might solve our structural deficit is to just say everything can only go up 2.5%. The bottom line can only go up 2.5%. And that means cutting services year after year after year because of healthcare and pensions and the other budget drivers that are outside of our control. So that's why I support this override, not because I think it's no big deal to raise your taxes, including my own. It's because I think it's a big deal to cut services that deeply. So thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Michael, try it again. We can't hear you at all at this point.
Pass then.
Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to take issue with some of Andy's comments. No surprise there. Cutting personnel is not necessarily equivalent to cutting services. The entire world, at least our part of the world, has benefited immensely from computers and technology and all sorts of things that have enhanced our standard of living, given us more services and all sorts of benefits at lower cost than we had 20 or 30 years ago, or 50 years ago. And the problem that I see in the town is that when we manage to introduce some efficiencies, when the capital planning committee brings in some new equipment or more computers or something like that, we don't cut personnel, or we don't reduce we don't reap the benefit of those efficiencies other than by increasing services that may not be appropriate. So I just want to differ with that comment that cutting personnel automatically means cutting services. There are ways to provide services, in different places that are provided sometimes more efficiently than other places. I think there's a fundamental inconsistency in what Annie just told us. She said that as a finance committee, we can cut budgets, and we can, modify the budgets on a case-by-case basis if we want to control expenses in the future. But on the other hand, her argument is that if we don't object, we shouldn't object to this override because we have to give the option to the citizens to vote to increase the spending. But the implication here goes back to this comment that we have heard time after time in past years, which is, wait, you can't cut this budget because the citizens voted for it. So there's a fundamental inconsistency here. And my argument is that the Finance Committee should be setting a standard and setting a policy that if we think that this strategy of the currently proposed override is not correct, or if we think there are other ways to do it, or if we think, for example, if the health insurance budget comes in lower when they may finally make this announcement in a couple of weeks, if you read the manager's statement, it was delayed, then the town can commit not to spend that money. But they haven't made that commitment. And so I think this fundamental strategy here on this override is flawed. And I strongly urge that you consider as a finance committee that we say to the town, let's stop spending or increasing our spending at this rate and find ways to improve the efficiency of government to the benefit of the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else want to wade in on this discussion? All right, what we have is two motions now. There's a motion by John to
You want me to read it? I actually typed it up just because I might not have been clear the first time.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, I move to pause the vote until we receive clarification on the commitments, specifically to the commitments to increase the school and town budgets by 4% and 3.25% respectively, allow for the identity of efficiencies that may alleviate the structural deficit and postpone a future override, but also will result in increases to those budgets by a lesser amount.
And Carolyn seconded that.
I moved. So moved. Yeah, that's.
And then the other motion we have is a straight up or down. Does everyone understand what John's motion is about? Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Does Chuck, go ahead.
John, I like it. Can we make it specific, like a specific commitments? Because what the select board said was very mealy-mouthed in terms of, what we're going to do to control the finances. Could we ask the town manager in your motion to make specific commitments for spending controls?
That's a different. Isn't that a different motion? John is asking that the vote be paused for clarification.
But he
Now-
also brought up commitments.
No, I just was wondering, like, I'm just wondering, it's a legitimate concern if, because I know Josh and a bunch of people, and I think Madam Chairwoman, you said that we will continue to look for efficiencies. We're going to both, pass this override to keep the town moving, this wonderful town moving, but we're going to continue to look for efficiencies. My question is how? Like tonight, we are voting to increase the school budget by 4% and the town budget by 3.25%. We might as well go home for the next 3 years. It's how I see it. Like the money's spent. I'll see you at 2030. So I want to, and Annie's shaking her head. Sorry to interrupt, Chuck. Annie's shaking her head. So I just want to clarify that that assumption is not correct. That this money, we're spending this money for the next 3 years and it's locked in. And if anyone tries to push it down a little bit, someone like Annie, with all due respect, will say, the voters approved this. So I just want to clarify that the voters are not approving to increase these budgets by 4% and 3.25% for the next 3 years. That's all I want to approve. And Chuck, great question, but I don't want to get into the numbers tonight. I don't want to get into the numbers. I just want to know that we are not agreeing to increase the school budget by, I'll give you the number, by $13 million over the next 3 years on top of, the increases that Charlie already referenced earlier. So I just want to, maybe we do increase it by $13 million over the next 3 years. Maybe we do. They're wonderful. It's a wonderful school system, but I don't want to commit to that tonight by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, Annie, you have your hand up. Are you going to address John's motion?
Yes, since my name was invoked, I would like to respond. I have never in any finance committee meeting ever said we cannot cut a budget because the voters voted for this. Okay, if someone proposed a cut to a budget, I would consider it in terms of whether or not I felt it affected the mission of that particular department. John, when we talked about those 4 positions in the fire department and whether or not eliminating those vacant positions would affect meeting the NFP 1710 standard, if you had motioned to cut those positions, I would have voted for it. But you didn't. So let me finish my thought here for just a minute. So my point is that the 4% and the 3.25% are caps. That is the max. They can't spend more than that. And that's how we've handled those particular commitments over the entire length of time in the last 21 years that we've been making those kinds of commitments. If we can come in under budget on any of these line items, that money will flow to free cash and extend the amount of time before we ask for another override. And we have in fact done that in the past. So that is how this has always worked. Those commitments aren't that we're going to spend, absolutely going to spend that 4%. If we find efficiencies or something comes in lower, we don't spend the money.
Just a very quick response. I know I'm sneaking in here, but when the school increased their budget by 7% last year and 8% the prior year, I said, why are they doing that? Annie, with all due respect, you said the voters promised these commitments to the schools. We can, and I quote, we cannot turn our backs on what we committed to the voters. That's a quote, Annie, with all due respect.
So, okay, I stand corrected, but the voters did vote to add to the school budget. In that instance, it's the only override that we've held since I've been voting in overrides where we committed to add money to a budget as opposed to maintaining a level service budget. And we did make that commitment, and it is what they voted for.
Excuse me, that's not true.
And in fact, let me finish my thought. We, in fact, have reduced the next 2 years by the amount of money that we had suggested we were going to add to services as part of these cost-cutting measures, and we are not delivering on the last phases of the strategic plan that those voters voted that money for, which, by the way, I agree with because we're facing such a very large deficit. So, end of point. Over to you, Chris.
All right, I see. If I can see a member of the committee saying, the voters approved the last override. Therefore, as a member of the committee, I am not going to vote to cut the school budget because the voters said yes. That doesn't, if that's Annie's view, that's Annie's view. It's not imposed upon the rest of us. It's an argument she can make. And it's an argument other people can reject as well. All right, so we have before us John's motion. If people have questions or comments about John's motion, I'll entertain them. Alan Jones, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am also very, I think that the commitments are probably too vague and a little wishy-washy, as I said before, but I also understand the need to get this done so we, can provide our opinion to the voters. So as an alternative, what I'd like to suggest, I'll reluctantly vote no against John's motion. But what I would like to do in the future is consider some sort of referendum within the Finance Committee that's well thought out, and I'd consult with the chair on this, that would provide some direction for the Finance Committee's representatives on Long Range Planning Committee to enforce some things that maybe aren't in the Select Board's commitment. For example, if state aid comes in next year a lot higher than usual, then instead of spending it, we'd use it to reduce the former year's deficits. And I think if it was a position of the entire Finance Committee, it might make our voices a little bit louder at the Long Range Planning Committee. So again, I'm going to vote no against John's, but I'd like to have a better thought out solution to it. And I think maybe giving us a little stronger voice at Long Range Planning as a whole committee might help. Thank you.
Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is I guess, related to this conversation, but Annie just made the statement that the last override was the only time that we ever voted to increase budgets. And I can say that the override that occurred prior to the pandemic, we had a phased-in approach where over 3 years, in each of 3 years, we increased the school budget by several $100,000. I can't remember the amount. The total came to about 1.5 or $1.8 million. And in fact, because of the pandemic, the school department agreed to postpone that increase by 1 year because of the uncertainty of the pandemic. So there is a history here of increasing budgets throughout the town in overrides. And I think that's part of the issue that we're discussing here. And I agree with John that, we should postpone this and get some firm commitments that, that there's going to be some controls and efficiencies going forward. And I don't think we're there. Thank you.
All right, Josh, do you have a comment or a question regarding John's motion to pause the vote?
I'm wondering if it's possible, if John has his, could we post it? Could you just share your screen so I can see it in writing? And then while John's doing that, I will just say, Michael, you might want to try and join in on audio on your phone, maybe. And in terms of Charlie and Annie and everybody's, I mean, I really don't think that they've ever gone back to the voters and asked for an override sooner than the promise. Exactly how that money's spent, I can't say, but again, it's not a candy jar. I don't think we have a profligate spending. Al posted in the chat that our per pupil expenditures generally are pretty much our spending on everything per capita or per pupil or less. It's easy not to pave a street for a year. Probably it's not going to cause too much harm. If a kindergarten class goes from 22 to 30, it's hard to give those 30 kids the year of their education back. So it's, nobody wants to spend any of the money. We'd like commitments, but I don't understand, in a sense, you're questioning the commitments on a broad scale, because I don't think we've ever violated them before.
All right, Scott.
Thank you. Just one question on sort of the mechanics of how John's motion might work. When would we expect an answer? I know that we're bumping up against the clock, right? A lot of folks have already said that. I mean, is this workable in that time? And then the second thing I would just say, great conversation, great debate so far. I'm hearing efficiencies and I'm hearing structural issues. Those are two very different things. In the budgets that I've reviewed, I'm not seeing a ton of fat. I heard someone use the word lean, and I think that's what I'm taking away from my first go around with this. But I am concerned looking 3 years ahead at like we are walking right into this again. So having a meaningful conversation around that structure and those structural issues is something I'd be interested to know how to plug in with that. But if we could just figure out the answer to that first, hopefully easy.
The answer is we don't know. These are the commitments that the select board makes. The select board would have to convene and discuss and determine that. We can't control that. We don't know when that's going to happen. Frankly, it's something beyond our control. All right, I don't see any other hands up. We have John's motion that Carolyn seconded before us. It's on the screen. I am now going to take a vote on John's motion. When I call your name, say yes, no, or abstain. Does everyone understand what we're doing now? All right. Paul Bear.
No.
Jordan.
Yes.
Scott.
No.
Sophie.
Yes.
Grant.
Yes.
Carolyn.
No.
Rebecca.
No.
Josh.
No.
Michael. I need to see Michael. Can you take down the screen?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Michael, where are you?
Here's a phone number. Michael, is that you?
Are you a yes or a no? Yes.
Your phone is muted. We can see
All
you.
right. Michael is a yes. Charlie.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Daryl.
No.
Annie.
No.
Alan Jones.
No.
Topher is not here. Peggy is not here. Alan Tosti.
No.
John Griffin.
Yes.
Dean is not here. David McKenna.
No.
All right. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeses. Is that what you have, Micaiah?
I was counting the no's. 1 second. 1. Six yes, 7 yeses.
And I have 10 no's. Is that what you have?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So John's motion fails. Now we will take a vote on the main motion, which is to either support or not support the override amount of 14.8. Charlie, you have a hand up.
I shouldn't.
Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to propose a amendment to that motion that we add to it that we support the override with the understanding that the 4% school budget limit is a cap. The 3.5% limit is a cap, or 3.25% limit is a cap. And that we expect the town to continue to look for efficiencies, and any additional revenue that comes in above and beyond the plan will go towards lowering the deficit in the future years.
Second.
Who seconded that?
Annie.
Right, any questions, comments, debate, discussion on Paul's motion? All right, we're going to vote. Jordan.
No, I was just going to ask, does it, Paul, as you're reading it, I'm looking at the override commitments from the select board, and I'm just curious, does that really change anything from what we've already seen?
It just makes it clear that these numbers, the 4% and the 3.25%, are caps on the spending and not promises to spend at that level going forward.
And I would just add.
And now, Michael?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if we can do this because we are binding the authority of our executive officers of the town. I mean, it's the right sentiment, it's the right words, but pursuing new revenue, aggressively seeking new funds, seeking efficiencies, why not just say we're going to stamp out waste, fraud, and abuse? Really, that's just, we can't bank on that. And I don't think we can, make it binding into the future. That's all.
John.
Yeah, I think Paul's motion was excellent, and I love that the introduction of the word cap. Thanks, Paul, and I will very much support it and vote for it.
All right, anybody else want to comment or address or question Paul's motion? Charlie. You're muted, Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a motion that that the town commits to constrain spending by the bottom line expenses in the first 3 years of the 5-year plan, and that any increases in any fixed expenses cause reductions in variable operating expenses. Period.
Second.
I need that in writing. I think Micaiah needs that in writing.
How do I do that?
You can type it into the chat.
Type it in the chat.
Now, I want to make clear that these conditions are binding on nobody that we are voting. We are wading in to express our opinion on the select board's vote to put a $14.8 million override on the ballot. We can make all sorts of statements, but it binds absolutely nobody for anything. The question I have, the concern I have is, what does the voter do with this? Does the voter understand what this means when we support the override with the but if, but only when? That's my concern about what we're doing here. It's not a clear directive that can be at all enforced by anybody. As John would say, even the select board's commitments aren't enforceable on anybody. At least they're the select board. All we can control is the budget we present to town meeting. So I want people to keep that in mind when we are adding these provisos to whether or not we're going to support or not the override at $14.8 million. do we have Charlie's motion?
I'm just finishing the typing here.
Can I say something while Charlie's doing that, Chris?
All right, go ahead, Kenny.
So part of the reason that I seconded both Paul's and Charlie's motions is because I believe they are both consistent with what has been past practice over the last 21 years. So I understand that these are not binding statements, but I do think that we are telling the voters that this is how the town should operate. And I think that that is how they have operated. So, my 2 cents.
Michael, do you have your hand up because you want to say something? No. Okay, why don't you take your hand down? Chuck, Scott?
Oh, yeah, and I just, to jump on what Annie had just said, you could read what's in that memo and say it's kind of squishy, that it looks like it's a mandate to spend, not, we're actually lowering, we're capping. So clarifying that with Paul's motion, I think makes total sense.
Okay, I'm going to send this now, I think. It's probably not the best English.
Well, like Abraham Lincoln, if you'd had more time to work on it, it'd be shorter.
All right, Charlie's motion is that he moves that the Finance Committee's support of spending under the 5-year plan is constrained to the bottom line expenses shown in the 5-year plan, and expenses in non-town and non-school expenses shall cause reductions in the operating expenses of the.
I'm missing a word, increase. Increase there. Increase in expenses in non-town and non-school.
All right. For Micaiah's benefit, Charlie, can you, and she's looking at the chat, can you say what your motion?
It's as read there, except that after the, where it says shown, expenses shown in the 5-year plan, and an increase in expenses in non-town and non-school expenses shall cause reductions in the operating expenses of the town and school. So I missed the word increase.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. All right, Micaiah, will you read what you have?
I move that the Finance Committee support of spending under the 5-year plan.
Let me interrupt. Wait. I'm assuming that this motion starts with the Finance Committee supports the $14.8 million override with. Is that correct, Charlie?
I'm not moving support. I'm moving that the Finance Committee support of the spending is described as there. I'm not committing myself to voting for it. I'm trying to get clarity on what the Finance Committee proposal is.
Well, that goes to John's motion that I think we already voted down, that we pause this for clarity.
No, I'm not asking for a pause. I'm just asking for what the Finance Committee vote means.
So I agree, and I have to say I'm confused myself as to what we're trying to do here with this.
You made a motion to support the override.
And I didn't make a motion. Somebody made a motion to support the override to get the debate going. Then then we had John's motion that was voted down. Then we have Paul's motion to support the $14.8 million override with the proviso or a clarification that the 3.25 and the 4 is a cap, correct, Paul?
Yes.
And I'm proposing that the cap be on the bottom line, not on the individual departments.
On what bottom line?
The bottom line of the 5-year plan on expenses.
All right, do Alan, you have your hand up?
Just that if we vote for this, we need to say which 5-year plan. There are a lot of them, so I would say February 12th, 2026, when we discuss.
Is
because there are a lot of 5-year plans out there.
Yeah, I'm the one that's before us. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
Which will change
Thank you.
next week. I mean, that's the problem by attaching this to a 5-year plan. By their definition, 5-year plans change, and we have seen, I don't know, 57 different 5-year plans in the last, I don't know, couple of months. So I'm not sure what numbers we're thinking that this is going to attach.
Well, then I would make the argument you can't tell me that we can figure out what the 4% increase in the school budgets are because the 5-year plan is going to change.
The 4% and the 3.5%, 3.25% are based on what the budget is for the next 3 years. What the budget, what money we have as the total operating budget. That's the 4.2. That's the 4%, and that's the 3.25%.
If I might, Chris, first off, on that comment from Charlie, the 4% is 4% from the 2026 budget, and then a 4% increase with 2027, and then 2028, 2029. That's what the 4% and the 3.25% are talking about. The other thing I might suggest, if we can do it, is maybe we can wordsmith the actual thing we want to vote on, including my proposed amendment and including Charlie's proposed amendment, and see maybe we can give the sense of the Finance Committee that that's what we want to do tonight, and then at a future meeting actually have a fully clearly stated motion that gets all the English correct and all the punctuation correct and whatever.
I would prefer that we deal with this tonight. We've got our core function budgets to do, and we're only really just starting those. So I see other hands up. We have to figure out what we're going to be voting on tonight and then do it within the next 35 minutes. Daryl.
So I'm just not up on my Robert's Rules of Order, but isn't the main motion on the whether we recommend the override or not, and all the subsequent amendments, Paul's and Charlie's, wouldn't they be attached to that?
And we would vote on these other amendments to the main motion first.
Okay.
Alan Tosti.
Paul, could you read out your motion again?
Can you give me a few minutes to put the words down more clearly? I'll try and get that back in a few minutes.
And Charlie, your amendment would be amending Paul's motion, correct?
Yes. But it could also stand on its own. Doesn't matter. I would point out that the original 5-year plan in 2005, at the time of the 2005 override, exactly had these constraints. And those constraints have been abandoned since then. Yeah, this isn't a panacea, but it does say, the remark has been made, and it's true, that when the town has encountered lower expenses, for example, when the town entered the GIC, the savings in the GIC went into the reserve fund and extended the period through which the override was maintained. But we have been consistently increasing the override. We haven't ever absorbed any fixed expenses and increases in the so-called fixed expenses against the operating expenses since then. And that's one of the reasons why we don't have any efficiencies in the town, because we just go back to the voters and jack up the override amount. And I think this proposal would constrain the spending in the town, hopefully, and produce some efficiencies.
How are you coming, Paul?
One more minute here.
All right, so Paul will have an amendment to the main motion. And then Charlie, I will want you to state what your motion is. And we will vote on Charlie's motion first, then Paul's, then the main motion. And Micaiah, you tell us if you have it down in an understandable, clear way for the minutes.
I'm going to go back and review over and over again until we get it right. A motion to approve.
Well, let's wait for Paul to Paul will read his motion. Let us know when you've gotten it. Then
Okay.
Charlie will make his motion. Let us know that you've gotten that, and then we'll take votes.
Okay, my motion is to amend the original motion to say, the Finance Committee hereby recommends that the town approve an override of $14.8 million with the commitment from the Finance Committee over the next 3 years to limit increases to the town budget to no more than 3.25% and to limit increases in the school budget to no more than 4%.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Didn't you have another thing about reduced expenses or?
I did, but that just adding that to all the words, it seems to make it more confusing. And if you want, I'll try and add some words to that effect.
Do you have that, Micaiah?
Because Charlie's motion tends to say something like that too.
Right.
Let us know when you are comfortable going forward, Micaiah.
Will you read it one more time? I'm so sorry. And you can also just send it to me.
But we all want to make sure we
understand
understand what we're voting on.
Okay. The Finance Committee hereby recommends that the town approve an override of $14.8 million with the commitment from the Finance Committee over the next 3 years to limit increases to the town budget to no more than 3.25% and to limit increases to the school budget to no more than 4%.
Okay, I understand.
All right. Charlie, what is your motion?
You're muted, Charlie.
I move that the Finance Committee support of the spending under the 5-year plan is constrained to the bottom line expenses shown in the 5-year plan, and increases in expenses in non-town and non-school expenses shall cause reductions in the operating expenses of the town and school.
You have that, Micaiah?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Which to me now seems like it's not addressed to the main motion, but it's a separate motion that can rise or fall on its own. Correct, Charlie?
It seems that way.
Okay. All right. That's my interpretation of Charlie's motion. Does anyone have any questions or comments about what is before us? We have 3 potentially 3 votes. I will take Paul's vote first, then the main vote, and then Charlie's vote.
Paul's vote approves the $14 million.
Well,
Correct.
it's a case, Carolyn, of first we have to amend the main motion and then we have to pass the main motion. And that's why there would be 3 votes.
Okay. Okay.
John?
Yeah, just in the effort of, first of all, I think this is a great discussion, so I think it's worth every minute of it. But with that said, I do worry that I don't want to overstep our authority. I don't want to maybe legislate or crunch any numbers or commit the town to anything. I almost want to stick to what Christine said, which she put my words right back at me, that, none of this is binding. Even the town, the selectmen can't even bind the town to spending money without the town meeting's approval. So with that said, I'm going to move I'm considering moving something that just says excuse me one second. So I think you guys can see this, but I'll read it. So move to support the override while also noting that the commitment to increase the schools and town budgets by 4% and 3.25% respectively are understood. We understand them as capped increases, and the town may work towards identifying efficiencies that may alleviate the structural deficit and postpone future overrides, but will also result in increases to those budgets by lesser amount. In other words, we don't want to commit the town to spending any amount of money because that's outside of what we can do tonight. But we just want to note that we understand what we're voting for as not, promising 4% and 3.25%. So I feel like it's a little bit lighter. Madam Chairwoman, does that make sense? And I don't want to clutter up the debate, but I don't want to overstep our bounds either.
I think for me, I don't see any difference between this motion and Paul's motion. Other than adding that the town will work towards identifying efficiency, which I believe is what in the select board's vote as well.
Noting that the commitment to increases it's understood as capped increases. Okay.
That's what Paul's motion is doing, correct, Paul? You are capping it.
Yes.
So, Paul, if I may, did you feel like this says the same thing as yours says? And if so, I'll delete it.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing.
So yours kind of covers this? Okay.
I think so.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Chuck.
Can I just hear Charlie's amendment again?
It's in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. I'm sorry.
Look under Josh Lobel.
All right. Any further discussion? Questions about what we're going to do? All right. Before us is Paul's motion. We will take that first by roll call. John and Chuck, could you put your hands down?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
All right. So everyone understands what we have before us is Paul's motion. All right. When I call your name, say yes, no, or abstain. Paul.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Sophie.
Abstain.
Grant.
Yes.
Carolyn.
No.
Rebecca.
Yes.
Josh.
Yes.
Michael.
No.
Charlie.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Annie.
Yes.
Alan.
Yes.
Topher is not here. Peggy is not here. Alan Tosti.
Yes.
John Griffin.
Yes.
Dean is not here. David McKenna.
Yes.
I have 14 yeses.
One abstention, 2 noes.
Right, so 14 to 1 is the vote, correct, Micaiah?
Correct.
All right, so Paul's amendment will now substitute for the main amendment, which is to approve the override at 14.8 with Paul's language. Does everyone understand what we're now doing?
Yes.
All right, everyone say yes, no, or abstain. Paul,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Sophie,
No.
Grant,
Yes.
Carolyn,
No.
Rebecca,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Michael,
No.
Charlie,
No.
Chuck,
No.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
Topher is absent, Peggy is absent, Alan Tosti,
Yes.
John Griffin,
Yes.
Dean is absent, David McKenna,
Yes.
I have 12 yeses and 5 nos. Is that your number, Micaiah?
That is my number.
All right. So the Finance Committee supports the $14.8 million override with the caveat, as Paul's motion states, that we expect that the 3.25 and the 4 are caps. All right. We have one more vote, and that is Charlie's vote, Charlie's motion. And I believe it's in the chat. And Micaiah, you have it. Does anyone have any questions or comments about Charlie's motion? All right, with that, we will start voting on Charlie's motion. Say yes if you support Charlie's motion, no if you don't, or abstain if you abstain from the vote. Starting with Paul.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Scott.
No.
Sophie.
Yes.
Grant.
Yes.
Carolyn.
Yes.
Rebecca.
Yes.
Josh.
No.
Michael.
Abstain.
Charlie.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Annie? Yes.
Alan Jones.
Yes.
Is absent. Peggy is absent. Alan Tosti.
Yes.
John Griffin.
Yes.
Dean is absent. David McKenna.
Yes.
I have 14, 2, and 1. Micaiah, is that your number?
I have 14, 1, 3. Scott said no. Josh,
Scott.
no.
Josh.
Michael abstain.
Yeah, so I have 2 no's. I have Josh.
Me too. Me too, sorry.
I have Josh
14, 1, 2.
and Molly, so that's 14-2 with one abstention.
Yes,
All
correct.
right. So Charlie's motion passes 14-2 and 1. All right. Thank you for a very good debate and discussion and lots of thoughtfulness. I appreciate it. So that is that agenda item. We have 18 minutes left. Does anyone have a budget available? Alan Tosti, you have your hand up.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Micaiah sent out the warrant. It's a draft warrant. It is subject to change and reordering, but it is there. I didn't see any articles that we need to report on in the selectmen or the zoning. But I think there's some articles on the managers taking aggressive looks at all of the fees and charges. So I think when the manager comes in, we should ask him about what his thoughts are on those. But we should probably go through it, I guess, on Monday and decide if there's any other people we want to have come in. But you should have them in your inbox now.
Yeah. Have people had an opportunity to look at the warrant? Okay. All right. I see some people nodding no. All right. So take a look at the warrant, and as Alan says, we will have a discussion about the warrant articles that we feel like we need to wade in on Monday. We will have the manager in. I've been talking to the deputy already about trying to schedule something. So hopefully maybe the early part of March, we will try to make time to get him and her in. Now that we're talking about scheduling, let's just go over what we have scheduled. Our next meeting is Monday, which will be at the police station. We're going back to our home. And unless we have another big storm, just plan on going to the police station on Monday and Wednesdays until we are completely done. I have on my calendar, and let me know, Micaiah, what you have, but I have the water bodies coming in on Monday.
Yes.
And Carolyn, we will have reclassification in HR on Wednesday. Is that?
Wait, let me just check when I'm meeting with her. Yes, we can, yes, we can do that on Wednesday.
All right.
Do you want conservation here on Monday as well?
They will come with the water bodies group, right?
Yes, yes. And they approve budgets on Thursday, so I'll send info to both.
Okay. I have Minuteman coming on Wednesday, March 4th. That's correct, Al Tosti?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Daryl, capital planning on March 11th. Is that still holding?
Yeah, we're busy writing the report.
All right, good. Schools on the 16th, I have. And who will have, I know that we have the controller's budget and retirement board on our calendar for tonight. Who will have budgets in addition to those, if we don't deal with those and complete those tonight? Who will have budgets on Monday?
So I have ACAC teed up. Micaiah kindly sent the materials out today. So if folks could look at that and let me know if that doesn't answer enough questions for us to take a vote and we need them to come in. But otherwise, I'm assuming we can review their materials and make a decision.
Okay. Chuck?
The treasurer and postage are ready.
Great. Jordan?
Facilities we can have ready to go next week.
Great. Charlie?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, we don't have the controller and retirement for tonight.
Okay, all right. Does Chuck, your hand still up or Jeff? All right, Charlie, would you have controller and retirement for Monday?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else who will likely have budgets for either next Monday or Wednesday? All right, Micaiah, I think we have some committees and commissions who
Correct.
we are trying to schedule for next Monday and or Wednesday, right?
Correct. We have Historical Commission, Water Bodies Conservation Commission, and Rainbow Commission scheduled for Monday, February 23rd, and then Wednesday, February 25th. We have Scenic Byway and Zero Waste Committee.
All right. All right. Everyone else, if you can try to get your budgets ready as soon as you can. As I've said before, once we start getting into March, we have Minuteman, we have schools, we've got DPW, we've got capital planning. All of that takes up a big chunk of our meetings, and I want to be able to make sure we have enough time to thoughtfully consider the other budgets that we are still waiting to review.
Have we scheduled community preservation?
We have not. That's Micaiah, you and I will work on the CPA people. That's another big presentation that takes up some time in our meetings. All right, so I don't think we have anything further to talk about tonight unless somebody else has something that they want to talk about, bring up. Anybody have anything? All right, I'm going to exercise my authority as chair to call this meeting adjourned unless I hear any objection. No objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. I will see you in person, hopefully, on Monday night.